The birth of cybernetics has been called the Big Bang of the Information Age. This description seems appropriate because the intensity of the explosion was so great that people have a hard time figuring out what cybernetics is about. The prefix cyber, used as having to do with cybernetics, is constantly borrowed to create different word combinations, from cyberspace, cyberpunk, cybernaut, and cybercafe to cybersex, cybercrime, cyberworld, cybertechnology, and cyberfilter. No wonder people can get confused, especially if they rest assured that cyber is synonymous with computers. More disturbing, however, is the fact that some books about the history of science do not mention cybernetics at all. Cybernetics is the science behind the high-tech digital explosion. On the other side of the coin, cybernetics has created a highly complex world. Economic and financial crisis, climate change, population explosion and migration, human rights violations, resource depletion, freshwater scarcity, corruption, and ignorance are some of the worldwide challenges that are demanding a cybernetic and system science intervention. In this video, I will explain the birth and evolution of cybernetics and build a map to go with it, and will show how it is positioned to help us create a better world. The story that needs to be told about cybernetics, if it is called to confront the challenges posed by a highly complex and sometimes unstable world, has its roots in the city of Athens, Greece, 350 years BC. This is the home of two of the greatest minds ever known. Plato and Aristotle use the word kybernetes, meaning the steersman of a ship, and extended the use of the word to mean the man in charge of a city, the ruler. Then the word disappears to emerge again as Kubernetes, the Latin equivalent. For the next cybernetic milestone, we must travel in time from Athens to industrial Manchester, about 2,100 years later. In 1788, the Watt steam engine, a cybernetic contraption, becomes the most important technology of the Industrial Revolution. Now we travel to Lyon, France. The year is 1834. André Marie Ampère, the French scientist, borrowed from the Greek language and coined the word cybernetique to identify the science of governing the state. Therefore, the preliminary impact of cybernetics is semantic. Governor, government, and governance originate from Kubernetes. In broad terms, cybernetics is the science of governance. The metaphor to go with it is a small boat, piloted by its captain making adjustments to unforeseen disturbances, much in the same way as Odysseus is depicted in this drawing, with a cyclop hurling huge boulders in an effort to capsize it. To find the best known and first formal definition of cybernetics, we have to travel to New York City, where cybernetics was born. Shown here is Norbert Wiener, an American ex-prodigy and mathematician from MIT, founding father of cybernetics. Wiener and other scientists were confronted with the problem of purposeful behavior just prior to and during World War II. Back then, scientists became aware that physics, in spite of all its glamour, did not have a solution or even a proper description of what was involved to produce life. As it turned out, cybernetics was a science that was able to explain purposeful behavior. According to Wiener, one of the first scientists to focus his thinking on what later became cybernetics was Arturo Rosenbluth, a Mexican physiologist doing research on homeostasis with Walter Cannon at Harvard University in the late 1930s. It was, however, until 1943 when Arturo Rosenbluth, together with Norbert Wiener and Julian Bigelow, produced a paper now quite famous in the history of cybernetics, where they questioned the assumptions made by traditional science. Purpose, they assured, could be built into a mechanism. The key was to create a connection in the form of what we would now call an information loop, where the output of the system is transferred back to the input and affects it in such a way that the mechanism will display goal-getting properties. When this paper was first presented publicly to a group of scientists, among them Gregory Bateson, Margaret Mead, and Warren McCulloch, the reaction was immediate. Warren McCulloch was researching neural networks, and Margaret Mead and her husband were both social scientists. All three, plus Frank Fremont Smith, joined in to create the core group behind the idea of exploring causal circularity, feedback, and purpose. However, the Macy Group, as it was called initially, got together until World War II was over. The high-tech digital world we live in today is a direct result of what later became a sustained peacetime effort where some of the most brilliant minds of the past century came together and shared and confronted ideas to give birth to cybernetics. Shown here are some pictures of John von Neumann, another illustrious member of the Macy Group. Von Neumann was a Hungarian mathematician, among other things, a developer of automata theory and co-author of game theory. It was during the Second Macy Conference in 1946 that John von Neumann presented the design for the very first general-purpose programmable computer, the ENIAC. He also made comparisons between computer and brain. After the 1946 Macy Conference, in the New York Academy of Science, Wiener gave a keynote address in which he spoke of information which should be measured using base 2 logarithm. Information has the same formula as entropy, said Wiener, with a negative sign in front. For Wiener's biographers, this presentation marks the birth of the information age. For the public at large, feedback became synonymous with response, and cyber became the trigger prefix for anything having to do with computers. Wiener took the governance and both metaphor a huge step forward. Control has to do with communications. He said, the control connection is achieved thanks to an invisible something called information. Control may require less or more information. Wiener and Claude Shannon from Bell Labs found a way to measure or quantify information exactly. The formula adopted varies, but stated in the most simple manner, It's the unit of information called a bit, an abbreviation for binary unit. We know it as a 0 or a 1. A bit conveys a unit of information where the probability of the message is zero point 0.5. If more information is needed, then more bits are needed to dispel the uncertainty. The core concept behind the Macy Foundation meetings was information feedback. A submarine torpedo racing towards the steel hulk of a ship, guided by magnetic forces, would be a good example of error-controlled, purposeful behavior. Smart bombs do the same. They zero in to a laser-painted target on the ground. So now, in addition to having a cause-effect logic, a new logic was discovered, a circular logic, where a system is always changing its behavior according to the circular nature of the environment's impact on its performance. A thermostat automatically adjusting the behavior of a furnace to meet a certain room temperature is the classical example of this process. Feedback was the concept that connected the world of the living to the world of the mechanical. Cybernetics is the science that built a bridge between living things and physical processes. So, not only did cybernetics link two worlds that were considered far apart, cybernetics also provided very powerful conceptual tools and the underpinnings of several of the sciences. In this sense, our initial boat metaphor is replaced by a cargo ship carrying such tools: biology, psychology, sociology, engineering, computer science. All of them contributed to the creation of cybernetics, but also benefited from the new field of knowledge. The christening of the new science is a very touching story. Picture this. We are at the 1949 Macy Conference, the sixth one. A sizable group of beautiful minds give Wiener a big applause as they welcome Cybernetics, which was the title for Wiener's new book, to become the title for the conferences already in progress. So, cybernetics was adopted instead of circular, causal, and feedback mechanisms in biological and social systems, which was kept as a subtitle. Humbled by the gesture, Wiener's eyes show tears and he leaves the room to hide his emotions. He seems immediately aware of his claim to immortality. A total of 10 Macy Foundation meetings on cybernetics were held from 1946 to 1953, all except one in New York City. In total, 70 well-known scientists participated. This is a photograph taken of the attendance to the last meeting in 1953. In a parallel and compatible effort, systems thinking and system science were being created by another group of holistic thinkers led by Ludwig von Bertalanffy, Russell Ackoff, C. West Churchman, and many, many others. Cybernetic topics were also boarded by the Ratio Club in Great Britain, which included Alan Turing, Ross Ashby, Gray Walter, and others. Here is a map of the birth of cybernetics, with some of the scientists related to each of the disciplines that made a contribution. As we shall see, the cybernetic paradigm will later engulf both cybernetics and system science. These are some pictures of W. Ross Ashby. In his book, Introduction to Cybernetics, in 1956, he redefines cybernetics. Ross Ashby wrote Introduction to Cybernetics as an introduction to Wiener's book. However, it is a gigantic effort because it rebuilds cybernetics from scratch as a formal science, in the same vein as logic or mathematics. He sets down some of the basic concepts of the new science and says that its truths are not conditional on their being derived from some other branch of science. Ashby invents idealized machines, which are the equivalent of what ideal shapes are to Euclidean geometry. Cybernetics asks, what are all the possible behaviors this machine can produce? In this way, information theory comes to play an essential part of the subject, because it is characterized essentially by its dealing always with a set of possibilities. Cybernetics deals with all forms of behavior insofar as they are regular, determinate, or reproducible. Cybernetics offers the hope of providing effective methods for the study and control of systems that are intrinsically extremely complex. It is chiefly when systems become complex that the new methods reveal their power, says Ashby. Ashby also introduces difference as a key cybernetic concept along with complexity, and its scientific name, variety, as the crux of control theory. Introduction to Cybernetics demonstrates the law of requisite variety, now known as Ashby's law. This law of control reasserts itself in real-life controlled situations in the same way that the law of gravity does in the physical world. Here is an example of an idealized machine, a pencil and paper machine, much like Alan Turing's universal machine, which is also a theoretical computer. Ashby makes cybernetics a formal science about change, using, as I said, difference as a key concept. The concepts needed to rigorously build the new cybernetics are shown on the right. Less than 40 of them, the work of absolute genius. It is Ashby's idealized machines, cybernetics, that provides the contributing sciences with a common foundation. This is the reason for being able to say that many pre-existing theories and sciences become interconnected to Ashby's new cybernetics. The generality of Ashby's principles and laws of control is outstanding. Ashby's cybernetics houses all of these sciences very comfortably. Here is a cluster of computer-related fields of knowledge, some of them from the 40s and others quite recent. The Turing machine started it all. Turing was the first to conceive the notion of a program running a computer. This cluster groups Turing machines, computer science, software engineering, communications theory, robotics, artificial intelligence, network theory, artificial neural nets, automata theory, genetic algorithms, cellular automata, complex adaptive systems, computational modeling, microchip digital technology, design, agent-based modeling, web science, data mining, and e-science, among others. Cybernetics is shown here in its connection to its related mathematics cluster through entropy, chaos theory, nonlinear dynamics, catastrophe theory, attractors, fractal geometry, and the science of complexity. All these are now cybernetics tools that help explain how life works, a central objective of cybernetics. These mathematics become tools of a science that needs them to explain life and purpose. The biology-related cluster starts with homeostasis and adds evolution, ecology, autopoiesis, self-organization, molecular biology, and astrobiology. There could be others. In the sociology cluster, we find conversation theory, game theory, cooperation, the prisoner's dilemma, reflexivity theory, social cybernetics, social systems theory, and global network theory. The psychology cluster is very large and includes adaptation theory, learning theory, psychocybernetics, and many other related fields. As we just saw, cybernetics was born as an interdisciplinary science, a science of interrelatedness or interconnectedness. But cyberneticians have taken cybernetics to another level. A new layer was added to it called second order cybernetics. It is the cybernetics of cybernetics. Second order cybernetics is about observing the observer of science. It is a different way of looking at the world and everything in it, a different way of making science, by far more abstract. So much so that it envelops both first order cybernetics and also the methods of classical science. The creation of second order cybernetics turns cybernetics into a completely different scientific paradigm in its own right, a different toolbox for building models of complex systems, interpreting data, and acquiring knowledge. Second order cybernetics was created by a group of thinkers and researchers led by Heinz von Forster and Gordon Pask, who see themselves as the offspring of the Macy Group. They have more interest in concepts than in hardware. The observer and the observed are treated as part of the same system. Consequently, the nonlinearities and paradoxes of self-reference have to be taken seriously. This group's initial concern was the theory of self-organizing systems. Thus, the philosophy cluster, shown above to the right, includes paradox, self-reference, emergence, biology of cognition, constructivism, and experimental epistemology in support of the ideas on self-organization. Having included second-order cybernetics in our map, it is now time to expand into management cybernetics. Management cybernetics is linked to neuroscience and to all the cybernetic fields previously included. To create management cybernetics, Stafford Beer incorporates ideas from Wiener, Ashby, von Forster, Pask, and others. Let's call this the self-governance and collective governance area of cybernetics. It starts with neuroscience. Management cybernetics feeds on neuroscience and Ashby's law to configure the viable system model. It also feeds from second-order cybernetics. The VSM uses the idea of two observers, each with his own language level, as indispensable in order to map complex organizations. By talking in terms of a language and meta-language, the VSM can intrude successfully into highly complex fields of economics, law, and politics. I call this systemic organization the cybernetic state, where cybernetic methods of collective intelligence will begin to play a major role in the future. Stafford Beer offers a definition of cybernetics as the science of effective organization. In the following graph, we can see how neuroscience and Ashby's law of requisite variety are incorporated to the viable system model. Here is a map of the human nervous system on which the VSM is based. The Ashby law connection is present as a very large red spot indicating a subjacent homeostatic connection of different parts of an organization to its environment or even among its parts. The lower half of the organization speaks a certain language. The upper half of the organization speaks a meta-language. This is a key feature of the VSM that allows it to overcome the complexity barrier much in the same way as the brain filters out irrelevant information. Now here is the big picture we need for a world in distress. Management cybernetics turns all of cybernetics-related sciences and theories into a big set of tools that can be used to benefit mankind. Representative government must be reconsidered in favor of a more participative, internet-based democracy. The VSM organization principles seen above to the right are waiting to be put to good use. The model is built from the bottom up. Any violation of these organization principles is asking for a lot of trouble. For instance, it is obvious that the US Congress is hardly the place where collective intelligence rules are being followed. General elections are another example of badly designed collective intelligence gathering. Cybernetic laws are ignored and cybernetic tools are being misused. We can see at the top that cybernetic tools are being used to increase perturbation variety, which then overruns hierarchic, reductionist governments. Big government and big banks are good examples of the mismanagement of the control equation. It is time for cybernetics to put its toolkit to work for the correct side of the control variety equation in a participative government aided by internet access. Law, politics, and economics are in urgent need of understanding the many benefits of embracing the cybernetic paradigm. The US Constitution, for instance, is an exercise in self-vetoing homeostats and self-referential statements, beginning from the statement, "We the people." The question is, are we the people ready to speak out again? Everyone should ask himself or herself, what would Thomas Jefferson be planning to do if he had the power of the internet? Sooner or later, I hope, the people will make good use of the cybernetic tools at their disposal.